um, one thing I wanted to say in the last pre-recorded lecture that you saw, that you obviously viewed for today's lecture, right? Today's Thursday. I said about how this connection between the divine liturgy and martyrdom, right? In other words, this idea that just like with baptism, how are we born in the church? By being martyrs, right? How do we become human beings? By being martyrs. Okay, so sacramentally, we anticipate that in our sacramental anticipation of our death and rising in Christ. And that's the same exact thing that's happening in the divine liturgy. And that's why Christ said, remember before his crucifixion, what did he say? He said, remember James and John came up to him and said, hey, Christ, I want you to do me a favor. What's that? Well, which shows something, and this is in the synoptics. It shows something very important, that they didn't get it. Okay, and that's what we said in the first lecture. So he's talking about he's going to be crucified. He's talking about all these things, and it's like, yeah. And what do? They think about glory. They don't understand that the road to glory is to the cross. They want to surpass. They want to bypass that. So what do they say? Christ, Jesus, look, when you come back in your glory, we want you to do us a favor. All right. We want one of us to be on your right side, and one of us to be on your left side when you re-enter in your glory, which means that they totally didn't get it, right? In other words, the idea of whereas in John it's very clear that the glory is the cross, right? We said that's the ascension, being lifted up, and so on and so forth. Okay, fine. So what did he say? He said, hey, that's not for me to give, but for those to whom it is given. In other words, for those to whom live that life, which allows them to, and God will grant that. In other words, but the life is going through the cross, right? That's how we become human, laying your life for the other, and so on and so forth, right? So what did he say? Are you able to drink? Are you able to be baptized with the baptized within which I will be baptized? And are you able to drink the cup which I will drink? And he's referring to his crucifixion, but the symbolism and the how do you say, the wording is pointing to baptism and Eucharist, right? The cup, the chalice, right? In other words, he's identifying that cup of communion, okay, with Christ. He's identifying that cup of communion with martyrdom, right? In other words, with the crucifixion, and also the baptism. Are you able to be baptized with the baptized within which I will be baptized? So both of those things. So the Eucharist is always like a reenactment of our baptism, let's say, or that's not a good way of saying it, but it's just in the same way that baptism is a sacramental anticipation of what we freely should be doing to become human. So is the liturgy. So, and by the way, you know what the word compatriot means? What does that mean? How do you become a compatriot with Christ? Any Latin scholars here? Con? What does that mean? You come on, John Latzidis. He looks there. He's acting like he's a doctor. He's got all this doctor stuff on him, so he knows Latin and Greek by heart because he knows all that vocabulary. Because how did you get your doctor's degree? Come. What does that mean? Co-celebrate.
That's it.
With. Compatriot. So. No, not compatriot. I want another word. I'm sorry. I hear an echo over there. The word is this, not compatriot. Someone needs to mute themselves because I hear an echo. Good. Companion. How do you become a companion of Christ? Com means with, and pan, panera bread. What does pan mean? What's the name of that thing? That bread that you get, that flat bread? What do they call it?
Can I figure out?
Panini. What do they call it? Companion. What does that mean?
Companion, to share with him his passion.
To share bread.
To share with him his
don't be so theological. I want you to go. I don't think that way. I don't think up in the clouds. Stop being in the clouds. Come on, get down there. Break bread. We've been talking about this the whole time. Companion means companion. How do you become a companion with Christ? You break bread. How do you break bread with him? How do you, eat bread with him? To be a companion means to eat bread. So you see how deeply this has gone. This culture from Christianity and from Scripture has gotten into even our language. We don't even know it. Okay, so that's a little aside. I'm sorry about that. But the main thing I wanted to say is that this connection of the Eucharist, the divine liturgy, with martyrdom, and that's why we have the relics of the martyrs in the holy table. So we don't. And you know what? You know when that really began, when they had to kind of like really make that connection with the martyrs, when the period of martyrdom stopped. In other words, when the period of persecution ceased. In other words, when Christianity was legalized, that's when you suddenly have this need to keep that connection, because before people were being martyred, literally. So he didn't need to have all these how do you say what's the word? Not these props. They're not props. I'm not making fun of them. But the thing is that you need this extra kind of like connection to remind ourselves of this is the purpose. And not only that, listen to this. Very interesting. Not only that, but once Christianity is legalized, that's when you see in the liturgies what? The words of institution. Take, eat, this is my bread, and so on and so forth. Let me bring the liturgy. One second. We have the words of institution in order to emphasize that connection. So what do we have? Let me just find it here. Yes, okay. Take, eat, this is my body, which is broken for you. You see? In other words, connecting the Eucharist with the broken body, with martyrdom, with laying your life for the other. You see the connection? That came about around the 4th century. That came about when Christianity was legalized, okay? Before that, you would find great variety in the divine liturgies. There are many divine liturgies, right? Don't think that, liturgy of St. Chrysostom fell from the sky. It's something that developed, gradually. And there were, we think that, in the ancient church, there was one apostolic liturgy, no variety, and then it broke up into different families. It's the opposite. There was great variety, and then the great variety you find in all these, all over the Christian world, the variety began to coagulate or crystallize around strong liturgical centers, and then you have families. In other words, in the same way that Robert Taft, the great liturgist, he said that, in Italy there used to be like 300 dialects, and now there are very few. In other words, it's that kind of process where from many, it becomes, one kind of like certain language centers or liturgical centers take precedence, and then you find these liturgical families, developing. So there was a great variety. That's the point I wanted to make. But in the St. Chrysostom liturgy and other liturgies, we have the word of institution. Words of institution are what we find in the gospel. Take, eat, this is my body, which is broken for you for the remission of sins. And then also, drink of this, all of you. This is my blood of the new covenant, which is shed for you and for many. So you see the connection between, in other words, martyrdom. Okay. And that's what he's talking about. Are you able to drink the cup that I am about to drink and to, be baptized in the baptism that I'm about to be baptized in? Okay, so I want to make that point because I didn't make it in the video that that there is that connection, that effort to emphasize the connection that could be forgotten once we get comfortable, because when Christianity is legalized and Christianity is the in thing to do, by the way, that's when you have what? The catechumens. Why? Before that, the people who are, to make sure that people who are going to become Christian are serious about, they understand what are they getting into. In other words, that this is a serious business, that this ultimately is martyrdom, even though, it's legalized now, Christianity, and we don't have, people being thrown to the lions in the arenas. Still, there's a sense in which you're in a Christian society, it's sometimes even more important for you to be a martyr to witness, right? Because it's easy to, get in bed with power and be very comfortable and domesticate Christianity. So in an effort to make sure that the people who want to become Christians were how do you say, serious. They had to be trained. Okay, so that they weren't bringing with them a pagan cosmology. Okay, because that seeps in very easily, and we oftentimes are very magical, and we oftentimes are very pagan. Okay, so that's a story for another day. But I just wanted to mention that. So that's when you have the catechumens, and that's when Great Lent develops too. And I believe I did in the lecture mention about the fact that Great Lent, this idea of 40 days of fasting, originally it could have started in Egypt, and it would have been this thing where after the theophany, just like you see in the gospel narration, he went out to the desert, right? Christ went into the desert for 40 days. And so in an imitation of that, it's possibly developed that way, but then it got attracted to, a Holy Week. So, and then you have Great Lent before Holy Week, and then you have, the Pascha, because Great Lent became a training period for those catechumens. Okay, in other words, because Pascha became the par excellence day of baptism, because that's the essence of what we're doing. That's the Paschal mystery, right? So what better day could there be to be to die and rise with Christ than the day that we're talking about trampling upon death by death, the one mystery. In other words, it's still holding together, even though we have all the different feasts that develop throughout the year because of that white light being, shown through the prism and so on and so forth. Great. Okay. So I'm sorry about that harangue, and I'm sorry about that, but hopefully that was helpful. I don't know. But I see that there are, all I want to do is to get you excited and upset so you can start asking me questions. And I succeeded. I think I succeeded. I see. When persecution ended, Richard Demko says to everyone, when persecution ended, didn't you also mention that that's when they stopped building churches over the martyrs' relics? Well, eventually, historically, it was convenient. I mean, it's not always convenient, especially under persecution, to just say, oh, I'm going to build a church here. So, in other words, the original idea was, when possible, to build a church over the relics, the martyrs, tomb, and make that into a mausoleum, right? Into a big tomb, and then, in a sense, the altar table is that tomb, right? But then it was more convenient to, because that could have been a random place where you could not, really build a church. So it was more convenient to, rather than bring the church to that relics, bring the relics to the church. So that quickly happened, and that's what we have today, right? But again, this is basically a thing that happens after the legalization of Christianity, right? So really, when the persecution ended, that's when the church was free to do this. So, remembering where there were martyrs before and so on and so on. But it's not a black and white kind of like thing where you can say that here's a cutoff point. So anyway, from Nice, C. Nice. I'm going to see who that C. Nice person is. It's an interesting name. What is that, Vietnamese or something? We'll see about that. Okay.
It's Sylvester.
Oh, Sylvester. Okay, that's good. Sylvester, the Pope Sylvester. In the church where I served in Thessaloniki, the 14th century church, St. Nicholas of the Orphans, there's a beautiful icon of St. Sylvester, the Pope Sylvester. And I always looked at that, and it was beautiful. Okay, it was in one of the niches over there in the altar, and I would always look at him. He had a special hat too, just like you seem to wear. No, that's your hair. It looked like you were wearing a hat, but that's your hair is so good that it's like a hat. Boy, that's good. Okay, Father, Sylvester Nice says, Father, in regards to the liturgy, do you believe Christ gave the apostles a basic liturgy to celebrate? Was there any apostolic liturgies from which all other liturgies developed? I answered the question already. I don't have to answer it. We're done. Okay, very nice. Any more issues, questions, problems? Did I upset you with the video? Things I said, I ruined your childhood or something like that, right? What happened?
Father, I put it in writing, but this is Chuck Ferris again. I don't understand what the benefit to moving the fast was. How was that beneficial to the Christians or the church? What
do you mean moving it? Moving it to Pascha?
Yes.
To connect it with Pascha being the par excellence baptismal day.
So they
because the fasting and training was to train those catechumens. They were fasting, and they were being prayed over, and they were being exercised. And then when they disappeared because we don't have them anymore. Basically, you have a few, but most people get baptized when they're babies. That state that remained, because it's also a way of us rejuvenating or revivifying or what's the word? Revivifying our own commitment as Christians, right? Because we forget our baptismal vows. We forget. And that's why during Great Lent, it's a time of more intense prayer and fasting and so on and so forth to help us remember again what life is all about and what life is all about what life is all about for a Christian, right? And the idea of saying that, look, man shall not live by bread alone, but by every word that, issues forth from the mouth of God, right? And so this kind of a thing where saying no to the good things and the good gifts that God has given us in order to say a bigger yes to God. In other words, it's kind of like an exercise that we take attitude with us all throughout the year, even when we're feasting. Because, by the way, feasting is important too. So we talked about fasting, the anticipatory fast and the ascetic fast. All those things are important, but they have no meaning if there's no feasting too. So, it's like two sides of the same coin. You need both. Otherwise, they both, in a sense, lose their meaning. Just like the tension between the preparation and the fulfillment in the liturgy. And that's why we have all the other services that, in a sense, are, preparing us for the goal, which is the kingdom, which is the liturgy, and so on and so forth.
But moving them in time, the fast already existed. It was already providing that focus and such, but moving it to be
if you're going to be fasting for 40 days in January, when you're going to get baptized, then you're going to wait, and then it's going to be no fast, and then you're going to be feasting, and then you're going to go to Pascha, and then you get baptized. You're going to forget all the stuff you learned.
Okay.
I mean the whole point is you're fasting, and so you're spiritually attuned and ready, and that's the appropriate time. Because then, if you just forget in other words, the whole purpose of the fast is to lead to baptism. If at the end of the fast you don't get baptized and you forget it and say, well, you'll do it next year, or you'll do it at Pascha, whenever, in a few months you'll do it. It doesn't make sense. In other words, they so maybe Elias Musa with those beautiful voices from Arizona could mute his thing, because we're hearing all kinds of Arabic poems and beautiful voices. We love it. Yes. Okay. So anyway, the church decided to do it. I don't care. The church thought that, judged that this was a good thing to do. That's all. What can I say? All right.
Father, I have a question, please.
Yes, please.
Sorry about this. I cannot type it, but because I'm driving, if you don't mind.
I noticed.
Yes, thank you. The question I have, daily cycles, weekly cycles, and the monthly is very clear. I'm a little bit confused. You mentioned in a lecture about the 56 weeks or 56 days on the monthly cycles.
Mm-hmm.
Would you please just go over it a little bit, if you don't mind, just to clear it for me?
Yeah.
Because you mentioned 8 weeks modus, 8.
Right.
You get my point. Would you please just to clear it for me?
Well,
monthly.
So what is 7 times 8 or 8 times 7? What is it? Any one of these mathematicians here?
56.
56. Okay. There are 7 days to a week, and there is a series of 8 weeks, because each week is dedicated to one of those 8 modes. And the symbolism of the 8, again, is this idea of the 8th day, that we're living in this narrative that everything is geared towards the day of the unsetting sun. In other words, after the perfect 7, because 7 was a perfect number for the Jews, we go beyond perfect. Okay, we go beyond this world. So the number 8 is important. We talked about the 8th day. Fine. So what we have is a series of 8 of these modes. I call them modes. Don't call them tones, because a tone is just a note. But we're talking about 8 scales, 8 musical scales, and that are used. in order, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and that's 8 weeks, and each week has 7 days, so it's a series of 56 days, and then after those 56 days are done, you start again. First mode, second, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And then throughout the year, you have these chunks throughout the year. Okay, it goes all the way throughout the year, and so you have this thing going on too. Okay, so that's where that's coming from.
Got you. Thank you very much. Yes.
All right. Okay, Joseph Lambrich, to everyone. If Day of Atonement, Yom Kippur, was the most holy day for the Israelites, why is there no explicit liturgical continuation around that feast? We have a continued and fulfilled Pascha and Pentecost, but it seems to be the end of it. Let me look that up, because I was reading about that, and I want to check if because there was reading some new scholarship, and a lot of the things I'm doing for you guys is totally fresh and totally new. I'm not using old stuff. I mean, some of my old stuff, but in other words, I'm trying to make it to be totally up to date. So I'm using some new scholarship. And there's this book. It's by Paul F. Bradshaw and Maxwell Johnson. Every time I see Bradshaw over here, this guy, I'm thinking, I wonder if he's related to him. This is a great liturgist, by the way. So Paul F. Bradshaw and Maxwell Johnson. I believe they're both teaching at Notre Dame in where is it, near Chicago or Indiana or something. I forgot where it is, but it's a Roman Catholic school, but it has a section or a department also for Eastern, liturgics and so on and so forth. In any case, in this book, a lot of things I'm saying are coming. The new scholarship is coming, like about Sunday and Pascha and where it's coming from and all this and that. And I was reading something about that. So I will, to make a long story short, I will check that and I will answer that in a better way. Okay.
And I think just kind of supplement to that question then, Father, would be, we have with the ancient Israelites, right? They had these 3 big festival seasons, with the spring and with summer with Pentecost, and there's like so much in the fall for them, right? They have the Feast of Trumpets and Day of Atonement and the Feast of Tabernacles, right? It's like the big crescendo of their liturgical year. And we look at our liturgical calendar for something in September, November, or it's like after Dormition, it's kind of like we're on vacation.
So we're going to get something for that. So because Father John Bear, in his book, The Paschal Gospel and so on and so forth, he says that, and this is one of the reasons why we said in this class that, the synoptics are more interested in, chronological history, in the sense that, and that's why they match, right? Basically, they're eyewitnesses, and therefore all of you are eyewitnesses of what I'm saying. If you're taking notes, all your notes are going to be different. Doesn't mean that this didn't happen. It means that it was real, because reality is complicated. In any case, eyewitnesses are never going to be exactly the same, because some people like to say, oh, it's a setup, or they're not consistent. That means it's real. But story for another day. What I wanted to say is the synoptics match each other, and they have a different historical, narration, because they're trying to basically, record things the way they happened, whereas John is not interested in that, and that's why it's totally different. He's interested in mapping it onto the liturgical cycles of the Jews, that Christ is the fulfillment of that, and therefore there's this notion of the temple, and destroy this temple, and I will raise it in 3 days. And the temple is a type. The real thing is his body, and that's what it's referring to. So the whole gospel is somehow, it's mapped onto these. So I'm going to check what he says about that, because that's a very good question, because indeed the Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement, is the most important. It's not Christmas. Christmas is just it wasn't important for the Jews, but now it's important because it has to, not Christmas, Hanukkah was not important for them. Now it's important because because in Western society we have to have something to how do you say, to compare with Christmas, with nativity. There's something like this going on, okay? Whereas for the Jews, Yom Kippur was extremely important, the most holy day, and so on and so forth. And so I'll get back to you on that. Okay, I need to go back.
And oddly enough, one last
Go
thing:
back to the
the only liturgical thing that comes to mind for these like fall feasts for the Israelites is on. And this is kind of the irony of it, on our Pentecost reading, the gospel reading for Pentecost, we read a section from John's gospel, but it's about the last day of the Feast of Tabernacles. So it's like it's this big confusing thing where
I believe, but it's because, see, the way that the lectionary and these readings are picked, it's because of something else that he says there, and I believe it's something about
it's about the Spirit coming.
Because he's talking about the Spirit welling up from your heart. I think it's that, but I'll go back and check that, because there's a specific reason for that. In other words, they're not interested in, how do you say, imitating the Jewish liturgical year, because it's very clear that Christianity came from Judaism, and so there's a continuity, but at the same time there's a radical newness. So everything in there that they take from the Jews is given a new content, but also they're not trying. They want to distinguish themselves over, and we're talking about the Jewish Christians, the Jews. They were Jews themselves, and they more than anyone else wanted to, being Jews themselves, to be in that, but at the same time distinguish themselves from that. So you definitely see that, yeah, and especially Palestinian or Jewish, documents, early church documents coming from that region of the world. They tend to, stress more of a distinction than other texts that are coming from, say, Alexandria. Yes. Okay. Yeah. So, what I wanted to say is this, and this is important. It's related. Is an example of the fact that this is something totally new, yet has continuity with the Jews. Yet it's at the same time there's a radical newness. Is this idea of the temple, and the temple had the priests and so on and so forth, and that was the priesthood was hereditary, and the only place where the Jews believed that you have the intersection of heaven and earth was the temple. But then that's a type, because Christ says that no, the real temple is my body, and we become his body in the church, and therefore we don't have priests. I'm going to shock you, because what we have is we don't have that. We want the early Christians wanted to distinguish themselves over against that kind of priesthood that was hereditary and that was limited to the temple. There was a type. But here we have the whole body. In other words, the church is not made out of bricks, but it's flesh and blood. It's all of you. It's all of the congregation. That is the body of Christ. And in the same way that the Jewish temple and also pagan temples, they would have like a building and with a statue or something like that, or a tabernacle, and there wouldn't be enough space oftentimes for a lot of people, and people wouldn't be allowed there. Here we have a totally different thing, where that temple is the people, not the bricks, not the building. You see, so there's a totally new thing here. So what the priests are doing, and the deacons, the clergy, in the New Testament, it's very clear that they wanted to distinguish themselves, that the priesthood, our priesthood, is not a continuation of the Jewish priesthood. Because some people like to say that. Some people like to think that, we're a continuation of Judaism, therefore we can. No, because that was hereditary, and it was a priesthood in the sense of people set apart. So we are set apart as clergy, but here's the difference. The difference is, in the New Testament, you don't have words like priest. Why? Because Christ is the priest. So later on, you might begin to see bishops being called priests. So the word hierefs is only for Christ. So in the New Testament, the only words you get for what we call priest today is elder, and for the bishops you get episkopos, overseer, right? So the idea is that it's a nation of priests. The whole body is the temple, right? And so we all have that role. And what the role of the presbyter or priest is to lead the people in their prayer. And that's why we talked about the prayers that are allowed. That Justinian in the 6th century said it's against the law if you make them silent prayers, and I will find you and I will persecute you. He says this. If you want me to quote it, I'll find it. Okay, if you don't believe me. But the point I want to make is, and so you don't have, the bishop being called archpriest or archierefs, or the priest being called hierefs. Only Christ has that title. And later on, the bishop, as the sort of type of Christ, is typon και topon Christou, as St. Ignatius of Antioch says, you begin to see them being called archierefs, okay? And later on, that trickles down to the priests, and they're called hierefs, right? But the word in the New Testament really emphasized the fact that we're leading the people in their prayer, that we're a nation of priests, that we're all clear. And it's very clear that it's not clergy versus laity. There are different roles, but it's more like, it's not like, this is what I want to say. It's not ordained versus non-ordained. Lay people are ordained. If you're not chrismated and baptized, you know what? You're not a layperson, because layperson comes from the word laos to theou. If you're baptized and chrismated, you are part of the people of God. That's the whole point. It's a nation of priests, and the priests lead this nation of. So the different roles of the people are the so-called clergy. They're leading. They're presiding. Okay, but they're not to be seen as, how do you say, a different category. It's different ministries working together to make the church complete. So it's like this rather than like this, and that's why. I don't like it when we begin to have these kinds of hierarchies, right? Because that's a later development. Because the early church affirmed each, category, each of the ministries, okay? And the concern wasn't about who has more authority and who has less authority, who is higher, who is lower, because that makes the deacon, for instance, to be a stepping stone, okay? So you don't have any rubrics, by the way, in the early liturgies, and even up to the 14th century, because I checked the manuscripts, of saying the deacon has to kneel, because that's already an attitude that you're lower. Okay, in other words, it's a how do you say, you need to be subject. Okay, and so you don't see that. There's a mutual respect, and there's no concern about who has more and less authority, but how all the ministries interpenetrate and how they work together and how they make the church Catholic, which means whole, which means complete. Okay, so you have this. In fact, there's a place even where the priest calls the deacon despota. Would you believe it? Okay, if you don't believe me, I could show you. But in any case, it's a story for a long day. It'll take us a long time to deal with all this. But the point I want to make also is that, in other words, if a deacon is not a stepping stone, that means that all of the ministries are coming 100% from Christ. They're not a part of Christ. You can't get a piece of Christ. In other words, everything, all sacraments are really all Christ. But we like to put things in a hierarchy. Well, the bishop is more Christ, and the priest is a little bit less Christ, and the deacon is even lower, and then the lay people forget it. They're totally passive, and they're out of it. Well, according to the way we look at the liturgy is an icon of the kingdom, which means that what are you going to have in the kingdom? You're going to have Christ, the apostles around him, the angels, and all the people around Christ, right? That's exactly the vision that we have in the synchronon, right? The bishop in the middle, the presbyters around him. That's why it was arranged that way, and all the deacons and all the deaconesses. And they are icons of the angels. The presbyters are icons of the apostles, right? And the bishop is an icon of Christ. And an icon is something that, not a pretend thing, but we venerate icons because they communicate a real presence, okay? And that's why we kiss the hand of the priest and whatever, and the bishop, okay? In other words, it's not about whether he's good or bad, but it's about what he is imaging, okay? And then the people are imaging all the people of God, but the deacon specifically is imaging the angels, and that's why they go back and forth. Angel means messenger. But the final point I want to make in this harangue that you started me into, again, Mr. Lambert, you always causing problems every day, is that the lay people are also ordained. In other words, what you're going to have in the kingdom is Christ, apostles, angels, all the people. All of those elements that are going to be those categories that are going to exist in the kingdom, they are ministries in the church. And all those ministries are icons, a foretaste, a participation in that reality here and now already. What am I saying? Well, if we say that in that kingdom there's going to be the people around Christ, then that's a ministry. And so that's an ordained ministry. And so the lay people are ordained in the baptism and chrismation. Chrismation was a laying on of hands, okay? So it's not like we have ordained and non-ordained. That's another misnomer and a misconception, okay? But we've been fed this because we have a very Western way of looking at all these things, and a very hierarchical. And we say that lay people are down here, then you have the deacon, then you have the priest, then you have the bishop up here. Well, again, we have a pyramid, and you might as well put a pope on the top, and then we're all happy, okay? So that's not the Orthodox Church. I'm sorry, because the Orthodox Church is always talking about, if you look at the texts, ministries working together to make, in other words, in the same way that it's the model is the Holy Trinity. In the same way you have three persons who are totally share divinity and are equal, total, three diverse persons, unique and unrepeatable, yet one. In other words, equal, right? Not one is above the other, but each sharing the full divinity, right? That's the way all the ministries are working. The model is the Holy Trinity, right? Where every ministry is taken totally from Christ, not a piece, not a stepping stone, not a lower version, not a higher version. Okay, but we love putting things in these nice categories because we feel comfortable, and plus, then we have the security of what? Authority. Okay, so the point I wanted to make is that the lay people are an ordained ministry because the ordination, because that was in the context of the divine liturgy. All ordinations are in the context of the divine liturgy, and the baptism originally was in the context of the divine liturgy, and that's Holy Saturday, what we do in the morning. That was the Paschal Vigil. That was in the evening, and that's why we have so many readings in the beginning, right, in that Vesper service, because that gives time for the baptism. So everyone would be baptized, all those catechumens that were being trained throughout Great Lent and then Holy Week, and then they would be baptized on the Paschal Vigil, which was originally was that service that we now wrongly do in the morning. Okay, so which means that the baptism was in the context of the divine liturgy, and it's an ordination, just like all other ordinations are done for the deacon, for the deaconess, for the presbyter, for the episcopos, the overseer, right? They're all done in the context of the divine liturgy. Okay. Once you have titles within those categories, those main categories are always in the church because that's an image of what we're going to have in the kingdom. Those are done outside the divine liturgy. If you get a title or you become an archdeacon, if you become Salvador, okay? If you become Salvador and you have those special title, that's outside of the liturgy. You say, okay, in Orthodox, I'll give you a special prayer and make you a big shot. Fine. All right? Okay, I'm sorry about that. That was a harangue. That was a rant because, Joseph always does this to me every time he gets my goat for some reason. I don't know why.
It's my gift. It's my gift.
It's a good gift you have. At least, hopefully I'm not boring the people. I don't know. Anyway, did I answer your question?
Yes. Well, you answered it that you would look into it.
Oh, okay. So how did I get onto all this harangue about? Who knows?
We just got there.
Well, hopefully it was an informative. Hopefully it was informative.
Yes.
The word Catholic doesn't mean universal. It means complete because it's a Greek word. Katatoolon, katholon. I mean, we have some Greek scholars here. Where's the good man? I love this man. He's so nice. He's so polite. Where is he? I'm gonna find him. Is it Demko or who? The nice guy from Florida. The nice guy.
Costa.
Huh?
Costas.
Yes, Costas Triadafilidis.
Yes.
So
it is
yeah.
Catholico is, yes, you're right. Catholico is
To
Catholon.
katholon, simeni, toolon. It doesn't mean St. Augustine, by the way, I have news for you guys. He didn't know Greek. He only knew Latin. So he mistranslated Greek words like Catholic, thinking, oh, it's a universal church. But then what you have is a universal thing over what? The community. And that's not the way the church worked, because every Eucharistic assembly was all of Christ, not a piece of Christ. And that's why we can't have a pope. You can't say that the pope is up there, he's the real bishop, and everyone else is just a piece. No. Every Eucharistic assembly is all of Christ. You cannot have a piece of Christ, right? And that's why when you give communion, you even give a little drop, a molecule, it's all of Christ. Okay. I have stopped. I've ceased yelling. Let me see if I have any good chats here to look at. Okay, here we go. Okay, Day of Atonement. Okay, we didn't answer it for Lamchek, and he's upset with me. So we go to the next one. Danilo Simic, a nice Serbian name. You are Serbian, aren't you?
100%.
I love it.
Voditelji, sve Srbin, sve
Have you been?
pravoslavni.
Have you been to Serbia? I mean, you were
You
involved
bet.
with the airport in Sparta, but hopefully you have gone to Serbia.
Yeah, when I was there in 2000, my company sent me to the first meeting of the Yugoslav American Business Council after the war. So I was there in
Right.
2000 and saw my family. And I was there again, and I was there first time in 1980, coming back from Saudi Arabia.
Great. Nice people, a little bit wild, but hey, as Orthodox we are a bit, you know.
Expressive,
Come
expressive. The whole
Expressive,
Balkan
expressive.
Peninsula is very expressive.
That's right. Yeah. Okay. Danilo Simic, please summarize the relationship between fasting, both anticipatory and ascetic, including the 4 fast periods, Great Lent, Nativity, Dormition, and the Apostles, and the reception of Eucharist. The way it works is you do what the church is doing, which means you live the life of the church. When the church is fasting, you fast. When the church is feasting, you feast. When the church offers the Eucharist, you take the Eucharist. Taking the Eucharist has nothing, because some people think that, well, before the Eucharist, you have to fast. Well, then why would the church be so silly as to have, after Pascha, when everyone's feasting, this is it's a feasting period, you cannot fast you just fast for 58 days, whatever, to have liturgies, and liturgy is there for fun, and people won't receive because, oh, they've eaten. Well, guess what? People have to eat. And it's not about, what you're eating. And that's not, in other words, that is not specifically connected with the reception or not of communion. The only thing that's connected with that is the midnight fast. Okay, that's it. And that's an anticipatory fast, not an ascetic fast, changing what you eat. Because some people fast on Saturdays, but the canons say you're not allowed to. It's against the canons to fast on Saturdays. Another canon says it's against the canons to not receive the Eucharist. If you don't do it for 3 Sundays, you're out. You're excommunicated. So it does. So in other words, these are things that evolved in the Balkans, okay, like your good friends, the Serbians, where they only receive like 3 times or 2 times or whatever. Because why? They ate. Well, I have news for you. People eat, because if you don't eat, you're going to die. So the point I want to make is, after 400 years under the Turks, we've forgotten a lot of these things. And it kind of like a popular piety grew up, because a lot of people perhaps, they forgot, let's say, they were not connected with, how do you say, let's say the eschatological, or kind of like this idea, this vision of liturgy as participation in the kingdom, eclipsed, or, was, how do you say, atrophied, because of all the things we talked about, seeing the liturgy as the life of Christ and so on and so forth. So what was overemphasized over this idea that the goal is participation in the kingdom, otherwise why are we doing it? What was overemphasized over against that was asceticism. So the ascetic taking precedence over the, let's say, the eschatological, or this idea of, just like, the historical symbolism taking precedence over the eschatological symbolism. In other words, that the liturgy is an illustration or a movie, rather than it being we moving. You lose sight of the fact that it's the work of the people, we're doing it, and the goal is the kingdom. Then there's all kinds of excuses not to go to the kingdom, right? And because of our unworthiness, and because of, asceticism is more important. In other words, when asceticism takes too much importance, and that's really what happened in the Balkans and during the Turkish occupation, there was a series of pseudo canons, they're called phony canons, that were developed in keeping with the mentality of the day, which was very legalistic, because of the ignorance, because of the people who were under slavery. It was a bad time, and we've inherited a lot of that bad baggage and those so-called phony canons, and some of them even got into the rudder. Okay, we don't want to talk about the rudder in this class, but the collection of canons by accident, and they, how do you say, they distort this way of looking at the church. They underemphasize, or they de-emphasize, or they even kill this way of looking at the church as we are in a procession to the kingdom. Okay, so to make a long story short, the canons say when the church is offering Eucharist, you take the Eucharist. When the church says eat, you eat. And Saturday is never a fast day. I mean, even in Great Lent, the fast is relieved. Okay, so there's partial fast, but it's never going to be a strict fast, except for one day, and that's because of this thing was moved from somewhere else, and then it put where it didn't belong in a sense, and that's why you see that it's the only exception. But the exception proves the rule, right? That Saturday is not a fast day. So during Great Lent, the fast is relieved a bit. You know, you can have wine and oil, whatever. Okay, so because if you can have you can have a real liturgy. Liturgy is the kingdom, so it's incompatible with strict fasting. You can't be doing that, right? So in any case, when the church offers Eucharist, you take the Eucharist. When the church feasts, you feast with the church. When the church fasts, you fast with the church, which means we're fasting on Wednesday and Friday, and Saturday you're eating, and Sunday you're receiving communion. That's what the tradition is. And I wrote a whole article on this. So I'm not just saying this out of,
Sure.
but I know that there's a problem because a lot of our yayades, after 400 years under the Turks, they said that this is tradition. Okay. And that's what the papades say in the village. And then that becomes a tradition over the real tradition. And they don't know, the whole, looking at the whole, trajectory of this story and what the church originally did. Okay. And so later on, there was this overemphasis of asceticism over eschatology, to make a long story short.
Okay, two quick points. One, there's that tension there with the Russians and the Serbs on that. I grew up in that culture, and you had to fast. And for me, it was an excuse not to receive. You receive twice a year.
That's exactly what happens.
Yeah,
Because
that's
the whole
right.
point is,
I get it. I get that. On the other hand, I told you about my brother, Father Roscoe, blessed memory. He's a seminarian, and he encouraged frequent participation in the Eucharist. But he also said, okay, during Great Lent, the Nativity Fast, Apostles' Fast, you got to follow that. If during the week you had a burger, In-N-Out burger, well, why'd you do that? You shouldn't have done that, and therefore you've kind of messed up your preparation to receive the Eucharist on Sunday. Okay, so that's how he thinks of it. But I'd like to. I'm just sharing that with you. I'm sure you've heard a whole bunch of stuff on this. And the second thing is, can you point me to that article?
I'll send it to all you guys. Okay. I also gave you. I also am polluting you with other articles. I'm being funny. I gave you an article because you're going to think I'm making up these things about, the tomb and the womb and Christmas and this and that. So I've sent you a little snippet that I wrote on that will help you kind of see that, in the church, we the starting point is the Paschal mystery. And so we like to think in terms, he was born, nativity, and then later on but the church doesn't really look at it that way. In other words, and you're going to see how I explain that. That's one thing. The other thing is about, in keeping with what I want to do, because of Elias Musa's question and talking about mom and mother and woman, I have another article about that because I'm going to explain some of that in the next pre-recorded video. And so, and the article might help you, very short article. It's actually in the newsletter for the Pawtucket Church. So George DeFoulis, he's read it already, so he can sleep tonight. He doesn't have to worry. Here's the thing. I'm very sneaky. What I do is I do these theological little articles because people want to say, the priest is working and he's got the newsletter, and they get mad if there's no Greek too. They'll never read it, but they'll get mad at you. Hey, where's the Greek? So I write the article in English and Greek. So it's in Greek and English. So whoever likes the Greek or the English, do it up. And what I do is I sneakily, I kill two birds with one stone. I write it in the newsletter, but I use it for my students. So it's actually, these are some of the assignments that are on the midterm and the final for liturgics. Okay, so they're very short and very simple because the hope is that some people like George DeFoulis, and he does read them and he likes them, so would read them. Okay, because people like you, people like George that are into this kind of stuff, they search it out, whereas other people want to just say that hey, the priest's working, he's not working. Anyway, story for another day. But okay, so I gave you 2 of those, and I will also attach for all of you this article that shows what happened. And I go back to the manuscripts, and you showing how this thing about receiving communion 3 times a year, that some of our yaya, the most pious yayadas, the most religious, the most this and that, they're the ones who receive the least. Give me a break, you know? And so in the article, it shows how there was a penitential, how do you say it? There was a penitence that was put on in the 10th century on people who were married 3 times. You know why? Because there was good old Leo the Wise, and he's the only one that got 4 women. And so after that, the church said, okay, he's the only one. Now, from now on, you only get 3. I'm being facetious, I know. But the point is that you're only allowed 3 marriages. And for those people who have had 3 marriages, they're under a penitence. And for them, they're supposed to receive only on the main feasts. And each of these main feasts happen to have a fast before them, okay? And that is Pascha, the Panagia, and Christmas. And so in the mind of the people, that ended up becoming, therefore, before, communion, you need to fast 100 days. So what happened was they took this in the Turkish occupation, they took it and they erased the reference to the people married 3 times, and they generalized it for all people. And so that's why, bingo, you have in your Serbian friends and in our Greek yayadis, this idea that, I ate. We never receive communion. Okay. The whole purpose of liturgy is communion. And if the priest is doing the communion by himself, and the church is having 10 liturgies during Christmas, when we're all not fasting, not even Wednesdays and Fridays, then what is the church doing that for? It's defeating the whole purpose. If you're not supposed to receive when you're eating, and then the church says eat, but also the church puts liturgies in the middle of Christmas. Agios Stephanos, right? 27th. 26th is the Synaxis of Theotokos. Every day there's a liturgy, and supposedly we're feasting, right? So it doesn't make sense. So anyway, I gave you the whole article, so you don't have to read it now. I just explained the whole thing. So I'll attach it, and you can have fun with it, and you can throw it away if you want, whatever. Fine. Okay, we're almost done. I mean, I've answered like 2 questions, and it's 5 o'clock. Okay, let me see what else we have here. Fun things. Okay. Okay, I answered Danilo Simic's question. Now I'm going to answer William Varnava's question to everyone. During the class, you have stated our purpose in life is to become human, a human being, and to lay our life with others. What specific practices should we employ, and how do we determine if we are? Was this from yesterday? It sounds like a sindahia again, like a recipe. No sindahiyes, no recipes in church. I'm sorry. It depends on the situation. But what specific practices should we employ, and how do we determine if we are meeting this? My understanding of this statement is that we are to imitate Christ. I have heard it said that God became man so man could become like God. Is that correct? It is correct. St. Athanasius the Great said that, so I'm not going to quibble with him. And it matches with everything we've been saying the whole week. And how is it done? God, in each situation, if you're in the church life and you're doing your private prayers, right? Whatever your canon is, in other words, prayer rule that's catered to your situation, not what the Athonite monks do, because they have the luxury of 8 hours a day or 10 hours a day. If you are in a family and you're doing it in 10 minutes, that's worth 10 hours. But do it. If you're in your prayer life, okay, and you're going to church, and you're trying your best to, and you're also receiving the sacraments. You're in the sacramental life of the church, and you're doing. The point I wanted to make about the fasting and feasting was, you do what the church is doing. You don't do things as an individual, putting yourself over against the community. In other words, there's a purpose that we're a body. Okay, we are a body. We are the temple of God as one thing, right? But we don't like to be a body. We like to be individuals that we're better and we're more spiritual, or we're this, or we're that, or we're lazy, whatever. The point is that the church is trying to form us with this schedule and with this typikon. So as you're doing that, and you're serious about the gospel and the scriptures, you begin to say that it begins to well up within you that this is the life. And then you understand in every situation, and God gives you the understanding that what am I supposed to do at this point? For instance, every moment there is one thing that you need to do in order to be doing God's will. What is that? Well, do what you're doing. For instance, right now, I'm supposed to be teaching you guys, and I'm supposed to be, doing my best. And so that's God's will. I can't be thinking about something else. I can't be thinking about, oh, my daughter needs this paperwork and I have to get an apostille. I have to go to Boston. I can't think about that. That's not God's will at this point. Later, before, it was God's will because I have to take care of my daughter. So in every moment, you do what you do. You do what you're doing, basically. In other words, which is in keeping with, the gospel, the good news. And in this way, you're laying your life for the other. And it's not hard. We can't complicate things. And there's no recipes, though. It's going to be different for everyone. It's going to be unique and unrepeatable because each and every one of us are persons. Just like in the Holy Trinity, each person is unique and unrepeatable, yet equal. Okay? Different, yet equal. In other words, they cannot be interchanged. So you can't have one recipe for everything, for everyone. Impossible. So
thank you, Father. That's a great answer. Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Yeah.
Oh, a miracle happened today, and someone was happy about my answer. Usually they get upset with me, especially in this class.
No, that was very helpful. Thank you very much.
Well, I'm glad about that. Okay. Okay, that was William of Arnava, and he's a good man. And I'm gonna look at that face and say, wow, someone actually appreciated some stuff here. Don Laftizis. I can't even say it. Why? Laftizis.
That's it.
That's it.
That's it.
The good doctor. Okay. So turn off the thing because I'm echoing again. Over the many years at my parish, I've heard many different guidelines for fasting. Oh no, here we go again. Never stops. It seems that almost everyone has their own list of restrictions and allowances. I've even gotten different rules from clergymen. What do you expect from those clergymen? They're always trying to confuse us. Are there canonical guidelines that specifically outline what foods we are to abstain from eating during fasting periods? No, not really. There are. I'm echoing again. There are basic guidelines, and it turns out that the actual details change through history. The only thing the canons talk about are strict fasting, what that is, and there's some mention about eggs and stuff like that, but there isn't a whole developed system. That is something that is a tradition that wells up, and basically you're not going to find it. It has become like the liturgical books and like the way we do our liturgy. All these things are not, how do you say, a decision from above. They're not promulgated from a council. Okay, so there is the tradition, and basically what we have is, in a lot of these things are coming from monasteries, and because the monks were always fasting in a more strict way than in the world, and so eventually their version was exported gradually. Why? What we do today is basically, so the point I want to make is even the monasteries they didn't have Facebook. I didn't know you probably didn't know this, but they didn't have telephones. They didn't have Facebook. They weren't able to communicate all over. So there was going to be a variety, and there was variety in the tipika. In other words, the rules for each monastery. They was not exactly the same, but these things began to crystallize and began to become more close, but there was never a unanimity, as it were, okay? But in general, what you begin to have is, by the time you get to the 14th century, the Palamite school, Gregory Palamas, the Hesychasts, they were Athonite Hesychast monks, and they had their way of fasting, just like everyone else had their way of fasting. I mean, the other monasteries, and the world was always influenced by that, okay? And that's where basically they got, how do you say, the model from, okay? The guideline from. So the Athonite 14th century monks, the Hesychasts, they had a special way of fasting. And what happened was one of the people of this school, his name is Philotheos Kokkinos. Okay, he was the abbot of the Megisti Lavra, the great Lavra of Mount Athos, and he became patriarch. But also he was a liturgical kind of a guy, and so he brought with him his tradition, what he knew from that monastery, and he didn't try to impose it on everyone, but he wrote a series of diataxis, and these diataxis are basically like rubrics or directions of how to do things. And what ended up happening was his stuff ended up getting into print. And so whereas there was a greater variety, once things get into print, and his stuff happened to get into print because he was so important, because he was a patriarch and because of the importance of the Hesychast school, once it got into print, it was frozen. So there's a sense in which, whereas there was more variety, you have less variety, and what we have inherited is basically the Athonite style. But that you cannot fast like an Athonite monk in the world, especially because their stuff is really good and really organic, and even when they're fasting, it's better than meat. But we eat plastic, okay? So you have to take everything in context. So people like to worship the rules, and they don't understand that the goal is God, and the goal is, these are guidelines, and they're always going to be catered to the reality of our situation. Having said that, there are certain rules, and basically, a strict fast is basically, no oil and so on and so forth, whatever, okay? And then you have wine and oil would be selfish, and olive oil and so on and so forth, and wine, right? And that's a great deal. And that's why on Saturdays during Great Lent, that's what they say, which means for people that weren't eating 7 hamburgers a day like you spoiled Americans, that's what you do, you think that you're not having your hamburger and you're in hell. Everything's black. Whereas for them, a little bit of wine and some shrimp, that was a great feast for these people. They were poor, right? And they weren't eating meat every day. Only the kings were, and even they weren't every day. Okay, so there were gradations that we don't understand today. So it was a big deal. So and after that, fish is the next thing. Okay, and after that is dairy, and after that is meat, and so on and so forth. So dairy and eggs, and then. So I'm not saying this for you to become overly scrupulous and then worship these rules and forget about the purpose, or the intent, or we get, how do you say, bogged down with the letter of the law, and we forget the spirit. Okay, in general, fasting is good for us. In general, we need fasting. In general, we need to say no to the good things God gives us, sometimes temporarily, not always, okay, because sometimes there's an overemphasis, like I said, even to the point where we never receive communion, or even to the point where we forget the meaning of the liturgy, that it's eschatology, that it's the kingdom. That's sometimes clouded over by an overemphasis throughout the year of ascetics. That's the most important thing. Well, I have news for you. It's not unique to Christianity, because people fast outside of Christianity. So that's not what makes our life Christian. Something else makes it Christian: the Eucharist. No one else has the incarnation. No one else has God becoming man. Okay, so that's the unique stuff. So, make a long story short, you say a bigger yes to God. You say a no to the good things that God gives us in order to say a bigger yes for a while. So you can, when you get to say yes to those good things again, you have a how do you say, an emphasized appreciation of them and God, and you take this with you throughout the year. So, in a nutshell, that's it. I don't know if I answered your question.
I, like the previous student, my classmate, I appreciate your answer. Greatly appreciate your answer. I was just, it's the basis for my question was, it just seems that within my parish, this is a subject that's of tremendous importance. And I was just kind of confused. How much of it is popular piety? How much is it from the Yayanas and the Papudas? And how much is actual,
a lot of it is the Papudas. But the point is that, that's more important. That's the most important issue. And we forget about crucifying ourselves for the other, because that's easy to talk about rules and regulations. Don't do this, do this. That's a lot easier than loving your enemies. That's a lot easier than laying your life for the other. But we lose the whole purpose. And that's important. And we have to be fasting. But that's going to be something that it's going to, how do you say, be, there's our guidelines, but the guidelines are not, how do you say, rigid rules, because it's going to depend on your situation. Every situation is unique and unrepeatable. You're a doctor. People are sick. If they're sick, they're not going to be fasting like someone on Malachos. Give me a break. They have the luxury of you have to go to, Whole Foods to buy expensive food that even that's terrible. Over there, they always have that. Give me a break. I mean, context is everything, but we forget context and we worship the rules. You see what I'm saying? That's our problem. And we forget the essence, which is crucifying ourselves for the other, becoming human, right?
Right. Thank you. Thank you, Father.
Okay. All right. Let's see if we have any other fun things here to talk about. Nothing but fun, I'm telling you. Okay, that was Laftsiadis. I'm very glad that we answered his question. He's a good man. Athanasios will. That's all it shows me. When/how did memorial services move from Saturday to Sunday? Or are there parishes in the West that still restrict? Here's the thing. When do you do liturgy? When do you do liturgy on Saturday? You know what? I said that Saturday is the Sabbath, and it has a new meaning, and it's always, how do you say, commemoration, a remembering of all the dead in Christ, because that's when he was in the tomb. And so it's a holy day. And so we in America are Sunday, because of maybe the Protestant influence, whatever, this idea of we are Sunday churchgoers. That's not orthodoxy. In traditional Orthodox countries, in Serbia, in Greece, in Russia, it's not Sundays only. Every Saturday and Sunday throughout the year. Because I said, remember, in the early church, it was Sunday and Pascha. Well, that very quickly became Saturday and Sunday and Pascha. And then things began to flesh out more and more and more when you had more and more martyrs and so on and so forth. Okay. But we'll talk about that in the next pre-recorded lecture, and we'll see how many questions we have on that. Saturday is always a liturgical day. And that's why even during Great Lent, if you're having a liturgy, you can't have a strict fast, because liturgy is the goal. Liturgy is the fulfillment, right? It's the participation in the kingdom. You're not going to be fasting in the kingdom. So symbolically, it's still Lent, so we slightly relieve it, because as we said, in those days, they weren't eating 7 hamburgers a day anyway. So, a little bit of wine was a big deal, okay? So every Saturday and Sunday, there were liturgies, and that's why they did the memorials where they're supposed to, because there was a liturgy. But now we don't do liturgy. So if you don't do liturgy, what are you going to do? You're going to do a memorial service, just a memorial service? It's supposed to be in the context of the divine liturgy. So that's the answer to your question. We don't do what we're supposed to be doing liturgically, which is we're supposed to be having celebrating the liturgy on every Saturday and Sunday. Okay? Did I answer that question?
I don't believe you, Father. I need sources. I'm joking.
Okay, sources. Okay, I mean, look, if you want sources, Saint Nicodemus of Mount Athos, there was a big controversy, the Kolivadis, the controversy. You probably know about that, right? Where it was a big deal that, just like the canons say, you're not supposed to kneel on Sundays, but also memorials are not to be said on Sunday, because what's being celebrated is the resurrection, and we're not kneeling, and everything is the resurrection. Whereas Saturday is appropriate because Christ was in the tomb, and we want to connect our death and our loved one's death with his life-giving death. Okay, so there's a theological reason for it. Okay, and so the reason that we don't do it anymore is because we only do liturgy on Sunday, right? That's the only time when you have a captive audience. That's the issue here in America. Okay, and so in Greece, where I was serving in Vlatavon, in Thessaloniki, are you kidding me? They would never do, not that all churches in Greece are doing it right, because they also do, because when they have a captive audience, because more people go to church on Sunday, even though they're doing the liturgies on Saturday, but few people go, they also cheat. But where I was, we were gung-ho, because we were liturgically, 100%, because who was there? At this place where I was serving, there was also an institute, the Patriarchal Institute, and Ioannis Fundoulis, some of you might know that name. He was a great liturgist, and he was like in charge there. So we did everything liturgically correct in a sense. Okay, so we would do, if it was a memorial, it would be on a Saturday. Okay, so that's your source. If you want, you can go back to Saint Nicodemus of the Holy Mountain. If you don't like, if that's not good enough for you, I don't know what I can do with you, Mr. Williams.
Thank you, Father.
Excuse me?
Thank you. And I'm
Yeah.
glad you're able to say my whole last name.
We aim to please. Now I see you in the window, because over here it's just giving you Athanasius will ...
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Father, can you send that article? Which article? On communion. Athanasius William.
Yes.
That's your question. Athanasius Williams, your question is the article on communion.
Right.
I'm
Yeah,
going to send it to everyone.
Okay.
It's very convenient with Canvas. I could just click a button and suddenly you all have it. Okay.
Good.
Joseph
Appreciate it.
Lambridge again causing problems. You're going to see how
No,
this
this was just a comment. This was a comment to what
going
was
to cause another harangue.
Yeah.
He's trying to make me rant again. He loves to see me rant for some reason. So you guys, and that's a deal you have with him, that they tell him, Joseph, ask this question, and then we can just be entertained. I know you have a deal, and it's very sneaky. It's very bad of you. So, Joseph Lambridge. The pre-communion prayers make it pretty clear we can't make ourselves worthy of receiving the Eucharist. E.g., fasting during the week. Yet that's not the only thing that makes, we think that we're always bogged down with our stomach. Like who was it? Like Laftisi, the doctor over there. That's the main issue. It's the stomach. That's the only thing that makes us worthy or not worthy, our stomach. Give me a break. So the pre-communion prayers make it pretty clear we can't make ourselves worthy of receiving the Eucharist, e.g., fasting during the week. What does that have to do with anything? Yet we do our best to approach in humility and not receive unworthily. Okay, that's a nice comment. I like that.
Well, you're making, because it was just a general comment, because we're talking about Serbs. We always like to pick on the Serbs, I guess, of not receiving the communion, but it's like
the Greeks do it too. The Greeks do it too. In my parish in Pawtucket, forget it. I don't want to mention some people because I don't want to upset the good man George Dafoulas. He's going to get mad at me. But some very holy people, good people, but they were trained that way, and I tell them, and they won't listen because papas sto chorio dexero etzile papas. They're stuck because the papa, over there, back then when they were young, whatever you hear when you're young, forget it. You can't undo it, right?
George, is there a lot of lobster eating on those fasting days in your parish?
Yes, and it's true. Father discusses this all the time in our parish, and nothing really changes, though, unfortunately. You just can't convince them.
Hey, Father, this is Ted Theodoro. I don't know if you remember me, but I actually went, I did my MTS at Holy Cross with you from 2006 to 2008. And I just remember when I was up there the first time, I mean, I don't know if the culture of the school has changed now since all these years ago have gone by. But when I was there the first time, the guys used to get into such silly canonical debates. At the end of the day, they just don't do anything to save people's souls. We would argue about, should a priest have a beard or no beard? Should the priest wear the anderi or the collar? And it was just, I remember these very just silly, superficial debates. And it looks like, some people still like to get some of that. But I just remember being so exhausted by it the first time I went to Holy Cross.
They still do that. And it comes from a wrong way of, and I believe it's related to this way of looking at the liturgy as a liturgy that's not a procession, but it's a liturgy, a self-contained thing, where it's imitating a heavenly or angelic liturgy. And when that trickles down to our relations with other people, we think the only thing you can do, the best thing to do is to imitate. In other words, it's a vertical, not a horizontal hierarchy. Imitate those who are imitating the angelic life. So they want to look like monks. You have these people, they're married, and they become priests, and they wear the monastic vest. And so it's a whole, how do you say, like a narrative that they're living in, okay? And that's in the church, all different ministries were affirmed, and they were diverse, they were different. There was no idea that everyone has to look like one model, because that doesn't make sense from the point of view of what St. Paul was saying. He's saying that the church is a body. Can the finger say to the eye, I have no need of you? And what if the whole body was a nose, or the whole body was a brain? That's a monster, okay? But they're going in that direction, and that's the narrative they're living in, unfortunately. And they're trying to, because there's this idea that, the more they imitate that sort of persona or what's the word? That model, okay, the better Christians they are. But that's not the essence of Christianity. That's not the essence of orthodoxy. The essence of orthodoxy is laying your life for the other, and that's wasting time talking about canons, okay? And then they get into other things that, forget it, I don't even want to talk about it, about relationships with their wives and this and that. And, well, you know what? Sleep with the canons. Leave me alone. If someone's smart, anyway, I'm not going to say anymore. That's it. But anyway.
Sorry to get you riled up there.
So are you Lambrecht's brother or something? You're doing the same thing he's
We're
doing.
in cahoots. We're in cahoots.
You're in cahoots. I can see that. Okay. Okay. Memorial service. We answered that. Okay. Okay. Matthew Mutzinger, to everyone. This is exactly what I tell my students. Life without hamburgers is the definition of hell. And that's why, now you got me upset again. That's why the proper thing to do on Holy Friday evening, that is the authors of Holy Saturday. Look at the service. We're talking about the expansion of the liturgical year and so on and so forth, but we ignore and by the way, you're mentioning pre-communion prayers. By the way, that's not part of the liturgy, by the way, okay? Because if the whole liturgy and all the prayers of the liturgy is not leading to communion, then what is? In other words, we replace the actual prayers that we don't hear with prayers that are not part of the liturgy, and we worship those prayers, and if we don't say those prayers, we have a cow, but no one cares that the fact that we're not involved at all praying the prayers of the liturgy, because the priest is leading you in your prayer, okay? So that just came to my mind. But what else was I saying? What did I start with? Sorry. I was starting to yell about something else.
I think burgers on
Burgers. Yes, burgers. Listen, Holy Friday evening. The idea is, if my stomach doesn't have burgers, I'm going to wear black vestments and purple vestments because it's hell. But they don't. It's so superficial. Everything is the stomach, and they don't understand what's going on liturgically. You're singing the Lamentations, the Engomia, and there's a light because Christ is already making the human being. Remember, we talked about how he makes the human being in the grave. That's why he spits on the ground and says, "That's what we're doing." That's what we're doing on the Sabbath. That's what the Sabbath is for. Not to yell at me and try to crucify me because I healed on the Sabbath. I did something good on the Sabbath. I'm making the human being on the Sabbath. How dare I? My Father is working, and so am I. My Father is working, and so am I. So am I working. So, yes. And then when he healed the blind man, he said, "Why was he born blind?" Because you always think it's sin. Oh, because his parents sin. God's a punisher in the sky. You're going to read about that tonight. God's a punisher in the sky. No, he's not. Why was this man born blind? His parents sin? Did he sin? No. So the works of God could be made manifest, and it's the Sabbath, because the works of God on the Sabbath is to build the human being, and then he makes mud. He doesn't just go like this. You're healed. He makes mud and sticks it in his eyes, and that's harkening back to Genesis, saying that that's what the job. That's only a type back then. We're created at the end, and during the lecture, the pre-recorded, I can find you one of the lines, one of the verses from Psalm 103 that we read in Vespers. Basically says, you take away their breath, they die. I have to quote it correctly, because basically it says, you die, and then you live. But I'll quote it correctly when I get there. Anyway, the point I want to make is on Holy Friday evening, you need to be wearing bright clothing. Yes, you are fasting, but that's the authoress of Holy Saturday. The next service would have been the Paschal Vigil. That is the Paschal authoress, in a sense. And that's why it's so bright. That's why it has a great doxology. That's why it has, all kinds of liturgical elements in there that you haven't seen in a long time that are pointing to a festival, a feast. Okay. But the fact that you're not eating, you can say, oh, if I'm not eating, I have to wear black, because you don't understand that it's not about this idea of I'm fasting because I'm miserable, but I'm fasting because I can't eat because I'm in love. I mean, it is an anticipatory fast, because that would have been done in the morning, and then all day there will be silence. Sigisato pasa sarx, let all flesh be silent, because the Lord is coming, and you're looking out the window. I'm in love. I can't do anything. I don't feel like eating. I want to look out the window. I'm waiting for my bridegroom. So the whole day there will be nothing, silence and fasting. Not fasting in the sense of I'm down on myself and I'm a sinner and this and that and ascesis. No, anticipation. And then it will be broken with the Paschal Vigil. And then all the catechumens would be baptized. It's beautiful. Okay? But we lose sight of that and we say, I'm not having hamburgers. I'm going to wear black. This is all about my stomach. And that's why the good doctor at his parish, that's all they care about. Because that's a good excuse for not crucifying yourself. Just thinking about your stomach. That's the only issue. That's the biggest theological issue, is our stomach, of course. Anyway, I've bored you with all this yelling. Anyway, life without hamburgers. See, you thought that was a joke, and it ended up becoming a big harangue. That was Matthew Matzuk. I'm going to see who that man is, and I'm going to, reprimand him for doing that. Ted Theodoru to everyone. Take care, brother. Okay, I like that. Okay, what time is it? Oh, it's 5:30. It's terrible. We went really over because you guys are really trying to rile me up for some reason. I don't understand why you're doing this to me. Any other questions before we sign off? So I can.
We got through all this without a honey bunch comment. we were busy talking about hamburgers.
Yeah, we didn't talk about honey bunches, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so you're gonna be forgiving because I want to give you the best, and I want to give you a really good. How do you say? Doesn't mean it's going to be good, but with God's help only. I want to add some stuff to the pre-recorded lecture. So it's supposed to be ready at 5, but it's 5:30 already. So how can I put it on? I'm talking to you guys. So be merciful. It's not going to be 3 a.m, but it'll be a little later, maybe 7 or 8. Okay, maybe earlier.
Take your
Father.
time. Take your time.
Take your time. Thank you.
Buddy.
And then it'll be there, and that's the last lecture, and we're gonna finish everything, all these things we've talked about. But hopefully, what we're saying ties together. Everything should be tying together. I want you to understand that it's not we're worshiping rules and this and typica and this and that and our stomach, but it's about becoming human. That's why I started the class this way. You say that's surprising. We're supposed to be talking about nya nya nya, and the festival of Pentecost happened in the 5th century, and then this in the 4th century, and then this happened, and that'll be boring. I'm telling you what the meaning of all of it is, and then you understand that it's beautiful, right? Maybe not. Who knows? All right. So last lecture, and then gonna have the live session. And my plan and my goal and my desire is to look at all those things, great things that you wrote, because I started reading them and they're great. I didn't answer them yet because it would take too much time, because unfortunately there's all the red tape with Greek schools, and I'm a father too, I'm a father of 5 kids. The other ones are older, but we have to deal with the youngest one too. Okay, very nice.
Father.
God bless you. But however, before you leave, we can't, ignore these 2 chat things. Pray for us, Holy Father. I will. God bless you guys. You guys are awesome. Thank you for a great class. I hope it. Oh, that's Argyrios. Where is that good man? He was in one of my classes too. So he knows the Zymaris experience, which could be terrible. And so I'm not saying that's good or bad.
The best experience, Father. The best experience.
I don't know about that, but he's seen me in person, screaming, yelling, dancing on the table, being in people's face and getting angry at them for not getting it and for worshiping their stomach, So this happens always. So I want you to know that this is just like seminary, what we're doing right now. The exact same questions, the exact same issues, everything. Great. Well, God bless you all, you good people of God. I look forward to seeing you tomorrow.
Thank you so much, Father. Thank you.
God bless, Father.
Take care.
Thanks all.
Nasta Gala.
Thank you, Father.
Thank you, Father.
Thank you, Father.